Well, a new year brings us a new car, new tracks, new teams, and new drivers. With so many changes, it'll be hard to predict what will happen in this year's upcoming season of Formula E. However, in this video, I will attempt to predict how the season will pan out in terms of the Drivers' Championship, and we'll also have a bit of a chat about some general predictions I'll have for the season. But first, let's start with the drivers. I will be counting down from P22 all the way down to the champion at P1, but at P22 and P21, the two worst finishers in 2023, I predict will be teammates Sacha Finastres and Norman Nato respectively. Nothing against the two, they've shown some solid prowess in their past, especially the rookie Sacha Finastres. However, I think the 2023 Nissan car will be the weakest in terms of competition in the entire field, and with Norman Nato's not so spectacular 2021 season and Finastres' lack of Formula E experience, I don't expect this combo to be challenging for the Constructors' title anytime soon. What I do expect is for both drivers to learn the season and be ready for 2024, but for now, they rank at P22 and P21. Jumping ahead 2 places at P20 and P19 respectively are Dan Ticktum and Sergio Sette Camara. Both of these drivers surprised in 2022. Coming in as a rookie, Ticktum put up some solid numbers and adapted to the new setting surprisingly quickly, keeping up with veteran teammate Oliver Turvey. And Sergio Sette Camara was the underdog story in 2022 with his astounding qualifying performances, reaching the duels at 4 E-Prix. And with his points finish in the Dragon Penske at London, Camara let the world know that if he was given a shot, he'd make the most of it. Unfortunately, both drivers will be racing for NIO this next season, and although they showed a bit of promise in preseason testing, I don't expect them to be race-winning contenders again. However, I do expect these guys to step it up a bit and grab points on a somewhat regular basis. Who knows, if the stars align, perhaps a podium wouldn't be entirely out of the question. At P18 is Oliver Rowland. I expect Rowland to do about as well as he usually does, place somewhere from about 8th to 15th on a regular basis, compete for points in the midfield, and have an occasional standout performance. Personally, I've never been all too impressed with Rowland. Although his P2 at the penultimate Seoul E-Prix was an impressive way to end out last season, I don't expect him to light the world on fire this year. Likewise, at P17, I have Nico Muller. Muller's making his return to Formula E after a year out, and although I have faith in his driving ability, I think it'll take some time for the Apple organization to get their grips. In preseason testing, I've seen them have some growing pains, and I believe the early part of the season will be a struggle for the entire team. But I do have faith in Muller. I don't expect him to go out and compete for victories or even podiums, but I think some points finishes aren't entirely out of the question. At P16, I've put Lucas di Grassi. In what I believe will be his final season in Formula E, Lucas will go winless and smell the bottom of the points table for the first time in his FE career. It's not that I don't have faith in his driving ability, I absolutely do. He's a former champion that's got perhaps the most experience out of anyone in the field, but I think it'll be a rough first half of the season at the new Mahindra team, one that hasn't had a multiple win season since Season 4. And at season's end, I expect di Grassi to finally hang up the helmet and enter a corporate role either within Mahindra or Formula E. Di Grassi's been here since the very beginning, and I think he's owed a solid farewell tour. At P15 is another veteran at a new team, this time Andre Lauderer. Lauderer as well, I expect to be leaving at season's end. After what was meant to be his final season in 2022, the German stuck around with his old organization in Porsche, jumping into their new customer team in Andretti. And although I expect them to be decently competitive, Lauderer has been on a bit of a downturn these past few seasons, and I don't expect him to suddenly turn it around. A podium or two wouldn't be all too surprising, but I don't expect him to get his ever-elusive first victory in his last season. At P14, I have Robin Frijns, and this is what I believe will be the result of an underwhelming apt car for 2023. On talent alone, Frijns is probably one of the top drivers in the series, but has never really been able to show what he's truly made of. The move to apt from Envision was an ambitious one, and I don't think it'll pay off in the short run. Despite this, I do expect Frijns to push the car on multiple occasions and score the odd podium. But like I said earlier with Nissan, I think the goal for this operation will be to learn as much as they can before 2024. P13 sees the Season 2 champion Sebastian Buemi. In a brilliant move by Envision in my opinion, Buemi was picked up by the organization to replace the departing Robin Frijns, and I think he'll be a great mentor to teammate Nick Cassidy. While Buemi's another driver I believe to be on his last few years in Formula E, he's still fairly competitive, and I think it'll be interesting to see what he's do when he's brought back to a half-decent car. P12 belongs to René Rast. Rast is another driver returning to FE after a year out, and I think he'll make some noise this year. In his brief stint racing for Audi, he showed himself to be an aggressive talent, but was unable to score a victory. I predict he gets his first E-Prix win this year, perhaps at his home Grand Prix in Berlin. With the McLaren package proving to be very competitive in preseason testing, I expect Rast to be a front to midfield competitor in this year's championship. P11 is the other half of the Envision duo in Nick Cassidy. In 2021, Cassidy really impressed me, scoring his first win at New York, having surely his second snatched away a day later with a battery change, and ending the year with some solid runs. Cassidy could really be a force this season, and with a veteran teammate in Buemi, I expect him to get even better. The Jaguar power unit may take a little bit of getting used to, but by the end of the year, I expect them to be solid contenders. A victory is definitely possible for Cassidy, and I'd put my money on one of the London races for the young Kiwi. At P10, I have another driver placed under Jaguar power, Sam Bird. 2022 was a very disappointing year for Bird, who I'd always considered to be one of the best drivers in Formula E without a championship. With no podiums and his teammate finishing second in the standings, it left a lot of questions for the season. However, I do expect him to get his confidence back at least a little bit. I see him breaking his winless streak on one of the Diriyah races and being a top 10 contender for most of the year. P9 sees my Rookie of the Year pick Jake Hughes. When the Brit was announced to the second McLaren seat, I was a bit disappointed that Oliver Turvey wasn't given the seat. Preseason testing has brought me to Hughes' side. He was quick in Valencia, and I think he'll be a real threat for podiums, if not race wins. The Gen 3 car really seems to suit him, and the McLaren seems decently competitive entering the year. At P7 and P8 are the Porsche duo of Antonio Felix da Costa and Pascal Wehrlein, respectively. I have high hopes for Porsche entering the Gen 3 era, and I expect their new signing in da Costa scoring at least one victory this season. All I can hope for is some solid consistency and maybe a higher finish in the constructors than they've had previously. Having a customer team may actually help them, bringing us to P6 in Jake Dennis. In a year where BMW were already on their way out, Dennis was able to compete at the front and score a victory along with a handful of solid performances in 2022. I expect Dennis to hit the ground running with the new Porsche power unit and take at least 2 E-Prix victories. I have my money on the new race in Sao Paulo, as well as his home race in London. At P5, I have the driver who I believe will shock the most people this season in Maximilian Gunther. After a pitiful 2022 season, preseason testing has shown that the Gen 3 car suits Gunther's driving style very well. And with the Maserati looking very strong, I think Gunther could bring back some of the Season 6 speed and take home at least one E-Prix victory, potentially at the team's home race in Monaco. P4 sees Mitch Evans. I expect him to stay competitive, but take a bit of a step back in terms of race wins. I see 2 wins at the very least, possibly coming in India and Jakarta, and another strong points finish for Jaguar. Now for our top 3. Slotting in at P3 will be Jean-Eric Vergne. Although his 2022 campaign saw 0 race victories, and he faded out of championship contention with several races left, it was definitely a solid season. And with how strong we've seen the DS Penske package look in testing, coupled with his experience as a 2-time champion, I think we'll see another great season from the Frenchman. 1, maybe 2 victories, and a heap of podiums should be the least of our expectations. Finally, for our top 2, revealing number 2 will obviously reveal a champion, so without further ado, your 2023 FIA ABB Formula E World Champion will be Edoardo Mortara, which leaves Stoffel Vandoorne to finish runner-up. Starting with Vandoorne, of course, coming off his first championship, he's probably the hottest prospect in the sport, and joining forces with another champion in Jean-Eric Vergne will make DS Penske a formidable team. However, as we've seen with DS, hiring 2 supremely talented drivers can backfire pretty badly. Season 4 at Santiago, Andre Lauder and Jean-Eric Vergne almost wipe each other out racing for the lead, and we saw many times over the seasons there were teammates. The rivalry between the 2 champions, Vergne and da Costa. Sometimes having 2 title caliber drivers is a good thing, and sometimes it's a bad thing, and I think in the end that's what's going to cost Vandoorne and Vergne a title and give it up to Mortara. Now, Edoardo Mortara has steadily been getting better throughout the seasons. After beginning his career in a bit of a slump, he's come alive in the past few seasons and has become a true championship contender. A series of errors last season in London kept Edo from having a chance at the title, but I think he's grown from that. The Maserati has shown pace in preseason testing, and with Edo's quick adaptability, I see 2, maybe even 3 victories this year, and so under the newly branded Maserati MSG name, Edoardo Mortara will be crowned the 2023 Formula E champion. Very briefly, let's go over the constructors table based on their driver's average position. As we see here, DS Penske obviously takes the title with Maserati not far behind. It's a real jump from Penske's pitiful performance in the last few years, but I think the DS pair-up will definitely help them. Jaguar jumps up 1 position for 2021, Porsche jumps up 3, and Vision falls 2 places, as does Nissan. Now for some final predictions regarding the season. For starters, I think at least 1 driver will miss multiple E-Prix due to injury. It's a prediction I don't like, nor am I hoping will happen, but with some of the technical issues we've seen in testing as well as the hard shunts, I don't think it'll be entirely out of the question. Next prediction, in at least 2 E-Prix, we will see the leader of the race retire with some sort of technical malfunction. We've seen this happen plenty of times in Formula E, and with the new car being even more complex, I don't think it'll be too surprising to see this happen multiple times. Next up, on a bit of a lighter note, Maxwell and Gunther I predict will win the most pole positions this season. We saw him make the duels twice last season in the Nissan, and again, seeing how well the Gen 3 suits him, I think his time trial place will be very impressive in the Maserati. Likewise, Jake Hughes will score the most fastest laps this season. Similarly, testing has shown that the Gen 3 car suits him very well, and the McLaren is very quick in a time trial setting. Now, to end it all off, I'll list two drivers who I believe will have seats in the 2024 Formula E grid, first of which is Jehan Daruvala. Signed on as a Maserati test driver, the 4-time F2 winner will be the replacement for Lucas di Grassi, and I think it'll be cool to see an Indy driver race for an Indian team. Finally, David Beckman will jump into the Avalanche Andretti seat vacated by Andre Lauderer. Beckman is signed on this season as a reserve driver for Porsche, so it would make sense to provide a driver for their customer team. Beckman put up some solid numbers in F3 and GP3, and I think he'd be a solid fit alongside Jake Dennis. Just before we finish here, I'd like to throw up my race-by-race predictions for the season. I know I have 11 different winners in 16 races, which I highly doubt will happen, but I'd like to be optimistic here and see how many I can get correctly. We may go back over these predictions at season's end and see how I did. So those were my predictions. Let me know how wrong I'll be in the comments section. I'm eager to see what you guys think. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in Mexico for the first race of the 2023 season.